Hi there, I'm Brent McGee. I am so thrilled. This is my very first Quilt National, first time I've entered and first time getting in, and so honored that I received the Sakwa Award for my piece Apollo and Dionysus, a whole cloth dimensional quilt, all stitched by hand. This is another example of the same kind of work behind me. This is another in the Apollo series, Apollo and Python, also completely hand stitched and stuffed with wool batting. It's just cotton muslin. So a lot of people want to know how I kind of came to the idea of doing this. Well, I received some feedback. I was originally making two-dimensional coral reefs. I thought that there was something about coral and the slowness of how it grows that just lended itself to hand stitching and depicting in quilting. Well, I decided to go 3D, and so I wanted to make a Pacific Northwest theme. That's where I'm from. I'm from the Olympic Peninsula in Washington. So I wanted to create that intertidal environment in 3D, and I did that. It was stuffed sea stars, stuffed barnacles, this kind of wild thing going on. I put it in a show, and I won Best in Show, which was surprising because it was a non-traditional quilt. Irene Roderick, who is also a Quilt National 2025 award winner, she saw the piece. She was like the keynote speaker, and she said, wow, this is amazing. Gave my favorite compliment on another. She said, this is positively obscene, the way I had posed some of the creatures. And I said, well, I want to enter it into Quilt National, but I'm going to have to make something new because they want new work. And she said, well, ask yourself if you can push it a little further. And this is something I had been thinking about. Is there a way to abstract nature when in cases like coral reefs and intertidal environments, it already looks abstract? So I went to the drawing board again, and I just grabbed plain white muslin and started to do some typical fabric manipulation techniques that I learned, like creating little balls. I can show you here on this piece here. I first started by making these, fabric balls. They're gathered. And then what happens is you have all this fabric left over and you've got to do something with it. And so you start sewing it down. Well, I start sewing it down and starting to create a composition. And so this was sort of my first small piece. And I thought, wow, I'm onto something here. Let's go big. Let's make a piece of art worthy to be contemplated, hopefully. So I got started working on this large piece, Apollo and Dionysus. Now, when I started working on it, I didn't plan for it to be called anything. I didn't know what I was going to call it. But as I was working, it had all the 3D parts, but then also there were these, flat sections that just hadn't been filled in yet. And I thought, boy, I better leave that blank. It's going to be so much better if I just leave that blank. And then suddenly I was reminded, it was like a rush of mythic energy came through me. I was reminded of a book that was very influential on me in my early 20s by Camille Paglia, dissident feminist. Many might consider her controversial for some of her views. But at that time, that was the early 2000s. I was obsessed with her point of view. She looked at the world in terms of gender, and she looked at it in terms of masculine and feminine energies, not in terms of male and female necessarily. And she described this phenomenon of Apollo versus Dionysus, which was also described by other philosophers. So essentially, to boil it down, Apollo is society. It's our roads, our skyscrapers, our laws, our religions, our customs, all the things that keep us human and keep us grounded against the forces of nature, the uncontrollable forces of nature. That's Dionysus. When I say uncontrollable forces of nature, I mean the weather, sure, or fire or floods or whatever. But I also mean going on within us, our Dionysian impulses to party. I mean, that's the original definition of Dionysus. We think of him as the god of wine, the bacchanals, etc. But really, think about it like this. Apollo, his golden bow, an arc of transcendence. It's there. You can see it. It's before you. You see the roads, you see the buildings, you see the skyscrapers. They're there. There's no mystery to Apollo. He is out front. You might want to think of Apollo as penile energy. A penis sticks out from the body. You see what you're getting. Turn over to Dionysus, and suddenly we're in the underrealm. We're underwater. We're in the bubbling, boiling, brewing of Yellowstone. We're in the caves where the limestone formations are covering the walls in strange forms. We're sexually aroused. We're angry. We want to hurt people. These are all our Dionysian impulses. We feel one way, but look another way. That's Dionysus at play with our biology. So much of Apollo versus Dionysus is about confronting our inescapable biologies. And that's what it boils down to for me. So in the piece, Apollo and Dionysus, you've got two representations. You've got the overflowing, this is just an example, an overflowing of this kind of movement. That's our Dionysian impulse. And then you have the straight lines of Apollo. This is not the only piece in Quilt National that's exploring these kinds of dialectics. Heather Ackerman's piece in Quilt National 25, one of my favorite, another, she talked about how two things can be true at once. And I think this is another perfect example of our inner energies. Two things can be true at once. We both want to be civilized human beings in a society, but we have inescapable nature. I want to thank you for listening to this little talk, and I want to thank everybody on the Quilt National Committee, all of my fellow artists for such a beautiful, amazing show, and a big thank you to Sakwa for sponsoring the award, and thank you all so much.